Welcome to the deep dive. We take fascinating, sometimes complex source material, and, well, we try to extract the radical insights, giving you a shortcut to being truly well-informed.
And today, we are really jumping into the deep end.
We certainly are. We're taking on one of the most famous, and I think it's fair to say, one of the most misunderstood stories in all of spiritual literature, the Book of Jonah.
Indeed. We're moving far, far beyond the Sunday school narrative of the man and the whale.
Way beyond. Our source for this is an incredible analysis by Dr. Roy E. Richmond, and his work just immediately posits that the Book of Jonah is fundamentally not a literal story.
Right. It's not about a reluctant prophet being swallowed by a large sea creature. That's the surface-level distraction.
That's the core premise, and it's what's so captivating. Dr. Richmond argues that this text is actually a profound allegorical map, a map revealing the mechanism of our own internal transformation.
It's a dialogue that happens entirely within us, within the sacred self.
So our mission in this deep dive is to, I guess, reconstruct that internal map for you.
We want to reveal Jonah as this deep parable, a story about the conversation happening between your sacred self, the divine mind, and crucially, the movement of ruach, or breath, inside your own consciousness.
Okay, so before we can even start the story, we have to establish a new vocabulary, a new metaphysical dictionary that the source provides. Because the standard terms, they just trip us up immediately.
You absolutely do.
Let's start with the most foundational one, our own identity. The source asks us to completely move away from identifying as human.
This is so crucial. If you approach the text thinking of yourself as a separate, physical human being, you miss the entire point.
Yeah.
You're already on the wrong track.
So what's the alternative?
Dr. Richmond's work insists that we identify, at least for the purpose of understanding this allegory, as visible breath.
Visible breath. What are the implications of a shift that radical?
Well, it changes everything. It's the difference between seeing yourself as a finite physical container that's, destined for decay, and identifying as the infinite animating spiritual force that uses that container. If you are visible breath, then separation from your source is just an illusion. Your primary identity is spiritual.
Interconnected and eternal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that context means this whole story isn't about some historical event. It's about the eternal ongoing truth of your identity. It shifts the whole goal of spirituality from, say, earning something to just realizing something you already are.
That sets the stage perfectly. So, with that in mind, let's define the main character, Jonah. His name in Hebrew means dove.
And the dove in this tradition symbolizes awakened awareness. So Jonah isn't a historical guy with a beard and sandals.
He's not.
No. Jonah is the messenger quality, that inner nudge inside every single person that carries the voice of breath. It's the impulse in you that pushes toward truth and wholeness. Jonah is the part of your consciousness that can hear and express divine truth.
So if Jonah is our own awakened awareness and we are visible breath, then the entire story becomes this intimate, closed-circuit conversation inside of us.
Precisely. The whole narrative just unfolds as an internal spiritual system working itself out. You have the awakened self speaking, the conscious awareness listening, the divine mind illuminating the path, and the breath empowering the whole process.
Okay, so we have to read the rest of the book as a psychological and spiritual deep dive into our own identity crisis and its resolution.
That's the map.
With that radical new dictionary in hand, let's step into the story. Chapter 1. The journey of the sacred self, as it so often does, begins with resistance. It opens with the call. A word from Elohim came unto Jonah. What is this metaphysical impulse, this internal command?
This is that moment of stirring. It's the moment the inner reality, your true spiritual identity, starts to conflict so strongly with your outer experience that, well, transformation becomes unavoidable.
It's that inner nudge you can't ignore anymore.
It's that urgent, persistent impulse from within that commands the awakened awareness. Move upward. Return to who you really are. Speak as the breath speaks. It's your soul saying, stop settling for this limited version of yourself.
And the assignment that comes with that call is Nineveh.
Nineveh, yes.
For centuries, we've interpreted Nineveh as this great, wicked city full of foreign people who deserve judgment. But allegorically, Nineveh is something deeply personal.
It has to be. The name itself means offspring, habitation, resting place. Nineveh is an allegory for the deep, unconscious parts of our own awareness.
Our own inner city.
Your own inner city. And crucially, it represents the parts of your mind that are still asleep. The parts that are still clinging to what the source calls inherited consequences thinking.
Okay, let's pause on that term for a second. Inherited consequences thinking. For someone listening, what does that look like in practice.
It's the fear-based doctrine we get from culture, from religion, from everywhere, really.
Right.
It's the deep-seated belief that reality is based on external law, conditional love, and, inevitable punishment for any mistake.
The idea that you have to earn your way back to grace.
You have to earn goodness. You have to pay for error. It's the mindset that believes you are fundamentally separate from the divine. And Nineveh is the accumulation of all those unconscious fears, that self-judgment, all those limiting beliefs you carry.
So Jonah isn't being commanded to go on a long journey to Iraq?
No. He's being commanded to turn inward and confront the most fear-ridden, punitive parts of his own mind.
And the initial response from this newly awakened awareness is to flee.
Of course.
The insight from the source here is so powerful. He flees not out of, spiteful rebellion, but because that unawakened part of himself feels totally unworthy, unprepared.
Terrified. It's the fear of self-confrontation, the ego, the unawakened mind. It realizes that if it follows this call from the breath, it has to dismantle its entire safety structure.
A structure built on those inherited consequences.
Exactly. So the first psychological move is always retreat, to go down.
And the scripture is very specific. It says he goes down to Joppa. That word down is always a signal, isn't it?
Yeah, always. It pictures a descent into carnal awareness, a mindset rooted purely in the physical, the temporary, the separated realm of the five senses.
And the detours he takes, the places he runs to, they define the kind of false security he's looking for.
They do. He hits Joppa first. The name means beauty.
Beauty.
So, allegorically, Joppa represents the attractive but ultimately deceptive allure of external religious or spiritual activity, the form without the substance.
Give us a modern analogy for Joppa. What does running to beauty look like for us today when we're trying to avoid real transformation?
Oh, it's everywhere. It's chasing external validation instead of internal truth. It's getting totally engrossed in the ritual, the beautiful aesthetics of a church or a temple, the exclusive group membership.
The complex terminology.
Yes, the fancy spiritual jargon. Anything that offers a pleasing, beautiful appearance of identity without demanding the hard, messy work of interchange.
So it's trying to solve a spiritual crisis with a beautifully packaged external formula.
You look spiritual, you sound spiritual. But inside, your fundamental nature hasn't changed a bit. You're just hiding in Joppa.
So he's running toward these things that look like truth but are just distractions. And from Joppa, he heads even further away. He's heading toward Tarshish.
Tarshish, which means a place of smelting, trying to obtain silver. Now, this allegory hinges on the symbolic difference between gold and silver.
Okay.
In this tradition, gold often represents divine purity, oneness, the pure essence of Elohim. Silver, on the other hand, represents kinship or relationship, a connection, but with distance.
So by heading to Tarshish, he's moving toward a belief system built on external kinship with the divine.
A structured relationship with God, rather than an inward, realized identification of being one with God.
That makes perfect sense. He's trying to maintain a safe relational distance. A comfortable kinship is much less scary than the absolute, terrifying intimacy of oneness.
He wants to be a friend of the divine, not a manifestation as the divine. That's a huge distinction.
This descent into carnal awareness chasing external beauty in Joppa and external relationship in Tarshish is immediately met with disruption.
As it must be.
And this disruption is the famous storm. Scripture calls it a great wind, which the source defines as ruach, as breath.
And this is not the hand of an angry God punishing a disobedient man. That is the old way of thinking.
Okay.
This is functional agitation.
Functional agitation. I like that.
It's a crucial reinterpretation. The breath is moving through his consciousness to wake him up. It's violently shaking loose the false security he thought he found in his outward escape. The storm is agitation, born of inner dissonance, not divine retribution.
So when the awakened self, Jonah, tries to move against its own nature, the whole system creates turbulence to correct itself.
The system corrects itself, yes.
Then you have that famous scene with the sailors trying to fix the disaster. Allegorically, what are they?
The sailors symbolize all of our external belief systems,
Mm-hmm.
doctrines, rituals, religious practices. They try desperately to calm the sea by throwing their cargo overboard.
Trying every external fix imaginable.
Every single one.
Yeah.
And they fail completely. This illustrates a core, uncompromising truth of this text. No outward system, no external formula, no amount of ritual can cure your inner dissonance.
Because the problem isn't external.
The turbulence is caused by the internal choice of the sacred self to flee its own purpose. Throwing cargo overboard, sacrificing external things, is just addressing a symptom. The cure has to come from the one who created the turbulence. It has to come from Jonah.
And while all this chaos is happening on deck, Jonah is found sleeping in the lower part of the ship. That image of the sacred self, just dormant, buried under layers of that inherited consequences thinking, it's incredibly potent.
It's the deep unconsciousness of the messenger quality, the dove who should be awake and guiding the ship. He's retreated so far down into carnal awareness, the lower part, the hold, that his essential nature has just gone dormant. It's been smothered by fear.
And the ultimate act, Jonah being thrown into the sea, is traditionally seen as the judgment, the punishment for his disobedience.
But the source just flips this entirely.
Yeah.
It's not judgment.
It's surrender.
It is the necessary act of surrender. The internal self finally realizes that holding on to the belief that you can avoid the call is actually more painful than just letting go.
It's releasing the entire erroneous path.
It is. When Jonah is thrown over, it signifies the consciousness finally letting go of its self-will, releasing that fear-based identity that was trying to run to Tarshish. It's surrender to the transformation, not defeat by the storm.
So the conscious self is surrendered to the sea, and we enter chapter 2, which is entirely contained within the belly of the fish. This is where the allegory really solidifies. The source insists that the great whale is not a monster. It's not designed for punishment.
No, it must be viewed as a womb. It's a temporary enclosure, a kind of metaphysical isolation chamber.
An isolation chamber.
It is. It's where the sacred self is held until the chaos of that descent dissipates, and the inner conversation can completely reorient itself toward truth. Think of it as necessary spiritual isolation, away from the seductive beauty of Joppa and the false kinship of Tarshish.
You can't do the deep work with all those distractions.
You can't. Without this isolation, the deep work just can't happen.
And the internal dialogue that follows is detailed by the source as an awakening, a profound realization, not a painful conversation about guilt and repentance.
Right, because guilt is just a byproduct of that old inherited consequences thinking. This space, this womb, is entirely focused on revelation. Jonah is forced to confront the truth of his identity without any external noise.
He remembers who he is.
He remembers who he is, realizing that his internal connection to the divine mind is constant, even in the darkest, most isolated place imaginable.
And in this isolation, he remembers the temple.
Yes, the memory is triggered not by a physical place, but by the absolute necessity of finding a center within himself.
So the temple is not a building in Jerusalem.
No, the temple is the inner sanctuary of the sacred self. It's the place where the divine mind always resides. That sanctuary is your constant center, the unmoving point of truth. And even when your outer consciousness is tangled up and fleeing, that internal temple is always there. It's always accessible.
The recovery begins by finding your way back to that center.
It does.
The description of the fish's belly is so visceral and symbolic. Jonah talks about the depths of the sea, the swirling emotions, all the beliefs that come up when your old awareness structure just crumbles.
And he mentions the seaweed wrapped around his head. I mean, what a perfect metaphor.
It really is.
It's the tangled thoughts that suffocate our clarity. When your old world dissolves, you're often left in this state of cognitive and emotional overwhelm. It's a seaweed fog.
These are all the inherited thoughts, the self-judgments.
The lingering fears that cling to your consciousness, making it feel impossible to breathe or to see the simple truth that's right there.
And yet it's from this place of maximum entanglement, this seaweed fog, that the most powerful truth is spoken. The core revelation of the whole book, really.
Recovery is of Elohim.
Recoveries of Elohim.
This is the absolute breakthrough, and it completely eliminates the transactional nature of salvation that we're so used to. It's not a promise of, if I do X, then God will rescue me from Y.
Right. It's not a deal.
It's not a deal. It's the revelation that liberation or recovery is simply the inevitable return to the realization of your oneness with your source. It's realizing the inherent identity that was never actually broken.
So the recovery is sourced in Elohim because Elohim is the true nature of the self.
Exactly. And therefore, the moment you realize that, the recovery is complete. It doesn't require a long struggle or some kind of payment. The realization is the recovery.
So if you are, as the source says, visible breath, you can't actually be separated. The belief in separation is the sickness. The realization of oneness is the instantaneous cure.
Precisely.
And the physical exit from the fish Jonah being vomited out onto dry land, it frames this whole experience as a profound birthing process.
It has to. It's the emergence from the womb with a fresh, reoriented understanding. The sacred self has completed the necessary internal work of confronting all the falsehoods of separation and inherited consequences.
It signifies the consciousness rising up, reborn, ready for the next stage.
Ready for integration, yes.
Which brings us to chapter 3. The instruction is repeated, but this time, the awakened self, Jonah, is in immediate alignment.
No more running.
No more running. He enters Nineveh, his own inner habitation, without all that fear and resistance that plagued him in chapter 1.
And this is the psychological manifestation of alignment. The conscious awareness has finally yielded. It's allowing the breath to speak through it instead of fighting it. The messenger quality now moves directly into the unconscious, fear-ridden parts of the self, into Nineveh.
What's so fascinating here is the source's metaphysical take on the size of Nineveh. It's described as a 3-day journey, and Dr. Richmond connects this explicitly to the 3 major stages of spiritual realization in this particular wisdom tradition.
This is a beautiful piece of synthesis that gives that timeline real spiritual meaning. The 3 days are not about literal travel time. They map the necessary sequence of the full journey of realization.
Okay, so what's the first stage, day 1?
The first stage, reflected in that first day, is Passover. This is your deliverance from mistaken identity. It's the realization that you are not the limited, physical, separate self you've been taught you are.
Deliverance from the bondage of the ego's belief system. Okay, what follows that?
The second stage is Pentecost. This is the illumination of understanding. The light of the divine mind shines directly on the truth of your nature and your oneness. You move past merely believing the truth and into deeply knowing the truth.
And the culmination of this inner journey, the 3rd day.
The 3rd day, or the 3rd stage, is Tabernacles. This is the full awareness of oneness, the complete and settled realization that you are permanently dwelling or tabernacling in and as Elohim. It's no longer a concept, it's your lived reality.
So Jonah's message, proclaimed over that 3-day journey through his own awareness, is essentially him activating these 3 stages of realization within his own consciousness.
He's addressing all the unconscious parts of his inner Nineveh.
Yes. As Jonah proclaims the message of the breath, the text says the people of Nineveh turn from the error thinking. We need to clarify that concept of turning, which is so often translated as repentance.
We really do, because in most Western religious systems, repentance is synonymous with begging for forgiveness, feeling intense guilt, performing penance.
Right.
But the Hebrew word here simply means to return. They are not begging for forgiveness from an angry God. They are simply returning to who they always were.
Returning to a state of alignment with their divine source.
It's a shift in identification from a mortal, fear-based mindset to a spiritual one. It's not a transactional plea, it's a homecoming.
The implication there is that the process is instantaneous once you have the realization.
Yes, the moment the error thinking is exposed for what it is, the return is possible immediately.
The whole concept of linear time and earned forgiveness just collapses.
It does. The internal world, Nineveh, realizes the truth and instantly returns to its foundational identity. The speed of that transformation reflects the fact that the wholeness was never truly lost. It was just obscured by fear.
And the response from the king, the ruling awareness of the mind, is a perfect, dramatic allegory of this surrender.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
The king represents the highest function of the conscious, decision-making ego.
And he immediately steps down from his throne, removes his royal robe, and covers himself in sackcloth.
This is the conscious awareness finally acknowledging the higher, absolute authority of the sacred self speaking through the breath. The ego willingly and immediately relinquishes its outer authority.
Why is removing the royal robe so important?
Because the robe is the outward garment of self-identification. It's pride, it's learned authority, it's the identity you've fabricated for yourself. The ruling awareness has to shed that identity to accept the truth of the inner messenger. It's saying, my external assumed authority is meaningless compared to the truth of the breath.
And the act of putting on sackcloth, which all the people of Nineveh do, is often misunderstood as this act of painful penance.
But here, the source suggests that sackcloth symbolizes shedding all outer coverings entirely. It's an act of radical vulnerability.
They're standing uncovered before the divine mind.
Exactly. Removing all the layers of doctrine, ego, and temporary identity they used to rely upon. It's a communal declaration. We have nothing to hide, nothing to prove. We simply return.
So what Chapter 3 proves, then, is the perfect efficacy of the awakened self when it finally aligns with the impulse of the breath.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
When Jonah speaks from that place of alignment, every single part of the inner world responds instantly. The unconscious beliefs, which is Nineveh, the controlling ego, the king, the entrenched doctrines, the citizens,
They all just rearrange and align.
they return to the truth of oneness. This is the goal of the internal journey. perfect, complete alignment of the whole self.
And that brings us to the most challenging chapter for the traditional reader and for the internal psychological process itself. Chapter 4, transformation has occurred. Nineveh has returned. And yet, Jonah is furious.
He is.
According to the source, this is the deepest moment of the entire parable.
This is the internal acid test. This is where the last, most stubborn piece of the old identity is revealed. Jonah is not angry because the divine mind showed compassion.
No.
He is wrestling with the shadow of that ingrained, inherited consequences thinking. It's still clinging to him, even after his awakening in the fish.
He wants consequences. He expected Nineveh, all those fearful, error-ridden parts of himself, to suffer, or at least to pay a very steep price for their former state.
And the breath, instead, reveals instantaneous, complete compassion, which completely violates Jonah's fundamental expectation of punitive justice.
This is the ego's last stand.
It really is. The ego, which was built on the foundation of earned merit and deserved punishment, it just cannot reconcile itself with unconditional, instantaneous grace. If there are no consequences for error, the ego's entire moral framework, which, thrives on comparison and judgment, it just collapses.
Jonah's lament captures this internal conflict perfectly. He says, "Was this not what I said when I was still in my land?" He's looking all the way back to the beginning.
He's basically saying, see, I knew it. This swift, compassionate movement of the breath doesn't match the conditional, punitive God I was taught about.
This reality contradicts my most cherished, inherited belief systems.
Exactly. Beliefs that dictated that people or parts of myself must pay for what they've done. The sacred self is struggling to reconcile the liberating truth it just realized with the deep, deep programming of conditional love and deserved judgment.
It just shows that awakening isn't a single moment. It's a process of internal dismantling. The transformation of Nineveh was complete.
But the transformation of Jonah's mindset about judgment was not.
He cannot accept that the parts of himself he had deemed wicked, the parts that carried the weight of all of that inherited fear, were simply allowed to return without a public trial or some kind of suffering.
So he retreats again. He sits outside the city, observing his own internal world, and he's profoundly uncomfortable.
He builds a booth, a temporary dwelling, outside the newly aligned city. What does that symbolize?
It symbolizes his temporary, half-formed perspective. He's not fully dwelling in the oneness of Nineveh, but he's also left the old paths of Joppa and Tarshish behind.
He's in a spiritual waiting room.
A spiritual waiting room, built on unresolved anger. He's waiting, still hoping that the old, punishing rules will somehow reassert themselves. He's sitting outside the joy and peace of the alignment that he himself just helped to create.
And here we get this highly detailed allegory of divine guidance designed to expose this lingering flaw. It starts with the plant that Elohim appoints to give him shade.
The plant is pure divine compassion covering his discomfort. It's a temporary relief from the harshness of his own unresolved anger and his expectations. The breath gives us shade, a moment of reprieve, a small comfort, even when we are internally resisting the most profound truth.
It's grace cushioning the blow of the ego dismantling itself.
It is. But true spiritual growth requires the dissolution of these temporary comfort zones. So the comfort is abruptly removed by the worm.
Right, the worm.
And Jonah gets angry all over again. Not at the worm, but at the removal of his relief.
The worm represents the necessary dissolving force.
It does. It consumes the plant, representing the destruction of old, comfortable mental habits or doctrines that provided temporary relief, but didn't actually address the underlying issue of judgment and separation. The shade has to go.
So that complete, painful, yet necessary illumination can take place.
Exactly.
And that illumination is brutal, the sun beating down on Jonah's head.
That intense heat symbolizes the full uncovering of every hidden belief that still needs radical illumination. It forces that inherited consequences thinking, the belief that punishment is required, out into the raw light of truth.
The discomfort is essential for the final awakening.
It is. The divine mind requires you to feel the heat of your own judgment being exposed.
And this leads to the concluding argument of the book. Elohim's gentle but very firm correction. You pity the plant for which you did not labor.
This is the ultimate final teaching of the entire parable. It means you felt ownership and pity for a small, temporary external thing, the plant, your comfort zone, something you did nothing to create.
And yet
you withhold that same boundless compassion and pity from the entire population of Nineveh, the vast, deep parts of yourself that were created by the divine mind.
So you wanted mercy for your temporary relief, but not for the massive parts of yourself that you have judged.
Precisely. You're willing to defend your small, temporary comfort zones, but you aren't willing to extend unconditional acceptance to the profound, difficult parts of your inherited self. The whole dialogue confirms that the spiritual journey isn't complete until the consciousness accepts compassion and unity for all parts of itself.
The source material really stresses that this entire dialogue is internal, which just confirms the whole allegorical nature of the book.
It's Elohim Ruach breath, revealing that every single part of the sacred self deserves restoration, not judgment.
And the book famously ends abruptly, right after this question. That's not an accident.
No, the source notes that awakening is an ongoing conversation. The final shadow belief, the need for judgment, has been exposed, and you, the reader, are left with the ongoing challenge. What is your answer? Will you accept boundless compassion for your own Nineveh?
This deep dive gives us an entirely new framework for one of the Bible's most famous stories. It transforms a tale of external maritime adventure into a profound internal map of consciousness.
It really does.
Let's just quickly synthesize the allegory one last time for everyone listening, reinforcing the completely internal nature of this journey.
Let's review that spiritual dictionary. Jonah is you. The sacred self, the messenger of breath, initially resisting the call to come into alignment.
The journey down to Joppa and Tarshish is that descent into carnal awareness, seeking temporary external comfort and a safe relational kinship instead of absolute oneness.
The storm is the functional agitation created when your consciousness moves against its own spiritual identity. And the sailors are all the external religious systems and doctrines, completely powerless to fix an internal dissonance.
The fish is that critical womb of transformation, the necessary isolation you need for reorientation and for shedding inherited fear.
Nineveh represents the deep places of unconscious, inherited belief within your own mind that need your compassionate transformation. And the king is the ruling awareness of the ego, finally surrendering its authority to the higher truth of the breath.
And that final, complex sequence. The plant is temporary, comfortable grace. The worm is the necessary dissolving force that consumes our comfort zones.
And the sun is the full, uncomfortable illumination, exposing every last hidden belief we hold.
The final core message from Elohim Ruach breath is so simple, so constant, and so internal. Return, awaken, rise.
And it establishes these twin truths that are essential for full realization. You are one with and is Elohim, and crucially, no part of you is outside the reach of compassion.
So the book of Jonah, in the end, is not a morality tale about a messenger who ran away and got punished. It's the story of the sacred self waking up to the truth that it is already whole.
Which leaves us with the ultimate challenge posed by that abrupt ending. If the book concludes with the question just hanging in the air, with Jonah still wrestling with his unwillingness to fully embrace compassion for Nineveh, the challenge for the visible breath today is this. How much longer are you going to build a temporary booth outside your own transformed city, waiting impatiently for the consequences of your past to show up, instead of just resting in the full, immediate, and unconditional realization of oneness and universal restoration? The work is always internal, and the compassion must be total.